Aguron, Iter Peludren Golani, Auen, Tyrannus, Owen, Brigid, Carnunos. Before me, the vulture of the skies and the powers of air in the east. And behind me, the bass of wisdom and the powers of water in the west. And on my right, the white stag and the powers of fire in the south. And on my left, the great bear and the powers of earth in the north. And around me flame the pentagrams, and within me shine the three rays of light. Greetings, and welcome to the Crafty Druid explores being on Earth. And I am your Crafty Druid, Ted Kaiser. I'm here in the Frontenac Arch Biosphere Reserve, here in our sacred grove, our sacred oak behind me. And thank you very much for joining me here as we begin here on episode 1 to explore being on Earth together. What does that mean, exploring being on Earth? Well, in this troubled times of climate change and declining biodiversity, it's hard to know what it means to be on Earth and how we should behave. It's a difficult time for all of us, but together we can explore and try to find meaning and understanding of this crazy world we live in. Each week we'll be exploring current events through the lenses of history, science, and religion in the broadest sense. And I invite you to join me. And why would you join me? There's a lot to know about me that you'll find in my bio video on the channel. But briefly, let me just say here in episode 1, in case you haven't seen that yet, my background is in both science and technology and the humanities. I have studies in engineering and technology, formal studies, and I also have formal studies and a degree in social work. I worked as a crisis counselor, but I was also the head of technology for a national counseling organization that delivered counseling through technology. So I have an unusual ability to bridge across disciplines, something that's rare in these days of divided specialties. So hopefully that's going to be a benefit to you as I explore each week what's going on in the tamed world and here in the wild, more than human world, and what it all means to us. It can be scary and depressing. Some YouTube videos lean towards entertainment, others towards being informative. We're going to stay more informative, but we're going to keep it light. We have to find hope. For people who confront the challenging issues of climate change and declining biodiversity, it can be hard to stay positive. It can be hard to remain hopeful. And for me, as I've experienced that, what I've learned and what I'll be sharing is that finding ways to understand this world and the role that we as human beings have in this world can be helpful. So each week we'll explore the state of our planet, current events within the tamed world and the wild world, but I'll be trying to make connections and understand things through the lenses of history, science, and religion. My religious background is in Western esotericism. I'm learning Druidry by following the Celtic Golden Dawn system of John Michael Greer. And so each week we'll situate our videos within the Druid perspective, and we'll be learning and exploring about that. I'll also be making connections to pop culture. Part of the way I cope with these troubled times and remain positive about human beings is to recognize the incredible creativity that we have through music, film, visual arts especially. So thank you for joining me here in the Sacred Grove, and I look forward to the coming episodes and sharing my explorations with you. So here today in late September in the beautiful Frontenac Arch Biosphere Reserve, let's explore. And the first thing we'll explore is the photo of the week. And this week, as every week, I'll be showing you a view of nature, usually from here in the Frontenac Arch, which is the case with this shot. Beautiful fall colors, and this was taken 2 years ago, but at the same time of year. Each week as we explore being on Earth, we'll check in with current events in the wild world and in the tamed world. You know, news can be scary and depressing, but climate change is happening, and for me, I find it's best to know what's going on, to be able to react to it and find ways to cope with it. So each week, I'll share news items from the tamed world that have floated to the top in my attention, and I'll read some highlights from each article. So this week I've got 5 articles to share, starting with the first article by Barry Hatton and Helena Alvis from the Associated Press. An article headlined, 6 young activists devote years to climate fight with 32 governments. Now comes their day in court. So here's the highlights from the article. Sofia Oliveira was 12 years old when catastrophic wildfires in central Portugal killed more than 100 people in 2017. Now a university student, Sofia and 5 other Portuguese young adults and children between 11 and 24 years of age are due on Wednesday at the European Court of Human Rights, where they are accusing 32 European governments of violating their human rights for what they say is a failure to adequately address climate change. It's the first climate change case filed with the court and could compel action to significantly slash emissions and build cleaner infrastructure. The court's rulings are legally binding on member countries, and failure to comply makes authorities liable for hefty fines decided by the court. The courts are increasingly seen by activists as a way of sidestepping politics and holding governments to account. Last month, in a case brought by young environmental activists, a judge in the U.S. state of Montana ruled that state agencies were violating their constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment by allowing fossil fuel development. Scientists say the world is far off its pledge to curb global warming by cutting emissions in line with the requirements of the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. Estimates say global average temperatures could rise by 2 to 4 degrees Celsius by 2100. Some governments in Europe are backsliding on commitments already made. But a precedent is giving the activists heart. The Urgenda Foundation, a Dutch organization that promotes sustainability and innovation, brought against the Dutch government the first case in the world in which citizens argued that their government has a legal obligation to prevent dangerous climate change. In 2019, the Dutch Supreme Court found in Urgenda's favor, ruling that the emissions reduction target set by the government was unlawfully low. It ordered authorities to further reduce emissions. The government consequently decided to shut down coal-fired power plants by 2030 and adopted billion-euro packages to reduce energy use and develop renewable energy, among other measures. Our second news item this week is by Alison Jones, published in the Canadian Press, under the headline, Ontario Legislature Resumes After Greenbelt About-Face and Minister Resignations. Ontario's legislature resumed sitting Monday on the heels of 2 cabinet ministers' resignations, a cabinet shuffle, and a major policy reversal. And that was just in the past week. Politicians will return to the business of the legislature after its 15-week summer break that saw the release of 2 damning reports from the Auditor General and Integrity Commissioner about the process to remove lands from the Greenbelt for housing development. The return of the legislature will see Premier Doug Ford set about backtracking on that decision, as announced last week, following nearly a year of public outcry. But don't expect Ford's abrupt admission that it was a mistake to open the Greenbelt to equally abruptly quell the controversy. Opposition politicians say there are still many unanswered questions. Quote, "I can assure you we are going to be using this opportunity to get more answers, because Ford and his conservative government have a lot to answer for," unquote. NDP leader Marit Stiles said Friday. She said there are still questions surrounding what developers knew in advance of the official announcement that the Greenbelt was to be opened up, what the Premier knew, what his staff knew, why his Director of Housing Policy resigned last week, and what emails had been deleted, as referenced by the Auditor General in the course of her investigation. Both the Auditor General and Integrity Commissioner found that the process to select lands was rushed and favored certain developers. Our third article this week is by Kasha Patel, published in the Washington Post, under the headline, "Scientists found the most intense heat wave ever recorded in Antarctica." In March 2022, temperatures near the eastern coast of Antarctica spiked at least 70 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 39 degrees Celsius, above normal, making it the most intense recorded heat wave to occur anywhere on Earth, according to a recent study. At the time, researchers on site were wearing shorts, and some even removed their shirts to bask in the relative warmth. Scientists elsewhere said such a high in that region of the world was unthinkable. Quote, "It was just very apparent that it was a remarkable event," unquote, said Edward Blanchard Rigglesworth, author of the study. Quote, "We found that temperature anomaly, the 39-degree temperature anomaly, that's the largest anywhere ever measured anywhere in the world," unquote. The seeds for the heat wave, Blanchard Rigglesworth said, began with unusual winds. Typically, winds blow from west to east around Antarctica and help isolate the continent from warmer regions farther north, allowing it to stay cold. But just as occurs with heat waves in the United States, the winds meandered and allowed a warm mass of air from southern Australia to move to East Antarctica in just 4 days. Quote, "Probably the first time that at least it's happened that fast," unquote, Blanchard Rigglesworth said. And in our fourth news item this week, also concerning Antarctica, and also by Kasha Patel, published in the Washington Post, under the headline, "Antarctica just hit a record low in sea ice, by a lot." And here are the details. Sea ice levels around Antarctica just registered a record low, and by a wide margin, as winter comes to a close, according to the National Snow and Ice Data Center. This significant milestone adds worry that Antarctic sea ice may be entering a state of decline brought on by climate change. This year, Antarctica reached its annual maximum coverage on September 10th, about 13 days earlier than average. At that time, the annual ice coverage was at a record low of 6.55 million square miles, a whopping 398,000 square miles lower than the previous record low set in 1986. Sea ice around the polar regions plays a critical part in protecting the adjacent ice sheets. Less sea ice means less sunlight will be reflected back to space, causing waters to warm more and destabilize surrounding ice and glaciers. Coastlines are also much more exposed with less sea ice, removing a buffer that could help protect melting ice shelves or ice sheets. Declining trends in Antarctic sea ice have been more unclear, but scientists now think the continent is hitting a turning point, much like the Arctic has. In just 7 years, Antarctica has experienced 3 new record-breaking low sea ice summers. A study published on September 13th said these records indicate that, quote, "the underlying processes controlling Antarctic sea ice coverage may have altered," unquote. Also, quote, It's not great news, unquote, said Gail Whiteman, an expert on global risks resulting from polar climate change and professor of sustainability at the University of Exeter. Quote, polar ice is one of the world's biggest insurance policies against runaway climate change. And we can see in both the North and the South Sea ice, we've got problems and alarm bells are ringing, unquote. And in our final news item, this one closest to home for me, by Megan Carty, published on CBC Radio, under the headline, World on Fire, 2023 is Canada's worst wildfire season on record, and it's not over yet. And here are the details. With choking smoke filling our skies in a summer that can only be described as unprecedented, no region of Canada has gone completely untouched by 2023's devastating wildfire season. More than 15 million hectares have gone up in smoke across the country this year, shattering the previous record of 7.6 million hectares in 1989, as well as the 10-year average of 2.5 million hectares. Climate change more than doubled the likelihood of extreme fire weather conditions in eastern Canada, according to a study by World Weather Attribution. So far this year, 6,118 wildfires have been reported across Canada. Nearly 200,000 Canadians have been placed under an evacuation order this season. As usual, news about climate change is daunting. There is some good news and some hope in the mix, though. What strikes me most amidst the reports of melting ice and burning forests are the shocking and destructive decisions that continue to be made by elected officials. Decision makers continue to make decisions that benefit a narrow range of wealthy human interests, but harm most people and the rest of the more than human world. In the first article, I summarized about Portuguese youth fighting European governments in court. The authors noted that Poland last month filed legal challenges aimed at annulling 3 of the European Union's main climate change policies. Last week, the British government announced it is delaying by 5 years a ban on new gas and diesel cars that had been due to take effect in 2030. The Swedish government's state budget proposal last week, meanwhile, cut taxes on gas and diesel and reduced funding for climate and environmental measures. And the focus of the second article was on how the government of Ontario favored a tiny group of just a small handful of wealthy developers who own just 15 parcels of land against all the creatures and humans protected by Ontario's Greenbelt. According to reporter Allison Jones, quote, more than 90% of the land removed was in 5 sites passed on to then Housing Minister Steve Clark's Chief of Staff, Ryan Amato, by 2 developers Amato met at an industry event, the auditor said. Both Clark and Amato have since resigned, unquote. In all these countries and cases, unelected officials, judges, auditor generals, and integrity commissioners, for example, are defending the natural world against terrible human decisions made by politicians who are elected to be effective decision makers. The decisions are being made by politicians, but what's driving the politicians to make them? Why are these decisions being made? Why favor a few wealthy interests to the detriment of all other people and life on the planet? Well, I think this is related to a dynamic that I will be talking about a lot in upcoming videos. There is a real economic impact of climate change. The worldwide population of human beings is drawing down the resources of the planet beyond its capacity to provide. This is causing 3 main effects. 1, climate change caused by mining and burning fossil fuels, which releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, trapping more solar energy, which raises annual average global temperature. And by the way, you should watch Sabina Hasenfelter's video for the science behind the human causes of climate change. It's linked in the description. 2, decreasing biodiversity as our mining, agriculture, forestry, fishing, and other economic activities cause pollution, overexploitation, habitat destruction which threaten many species with decreasing populations, and extinction. And 3, the dawning realization that the Earth's resources are like a finite and shrinking pie, and with more people all the time, each person's slice of that pie is getting smaller. Some people are really greedy about their slice of pie, though. Those developers that corrupted the government into compromising the Greenbelt, according to the Auditor General, they stood to see their land value increase by 8.3 billion Canadian dollars. Politicians are funded by wealthy and powerful interests like these developers and elected by voters. So, behind the politicians, the perceived economic interests of people focused on short-term material concerns are driving these bad decisions. The mission of this channel is to explore being on Earth. Part of that exploration is to bridge across various fields of study. From a Druid's perspective, the Earth is a single being. Where others see divisions, Druids see connections. All creatures, including humans, are connected, as are all human activities, including creativity in the arts. So now, let's take a look and a listen at some creative expression that connects to the theme of bad decisions this week and the need for more planetary awareness. First, let's take a listen to a great song. Among many people, musicians are among artists who have begun to express the idea that we all need to love our planet more. One of my favorite songs exploring this theme is by the amazing and prolific Australian band King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. For those of you who know them, you probably know that I am referring to their awesome song, Planet B. Here are a few screen grabs and some of the lyrics to give you just a taste of this great song. Check out the link in the description to go see the music video for Planet B on YouTube. And the t-shirt of the week is by Canadian artist Jess Ritchick. I got to meet Jess in person at a metaphysical supplies show and sale in Toronto several years ago. She is a sweet and gentle soul and a very talented artist. Jess calls this design Howl of Stone, and it features a wolf and king cobras. You may have noticed that I was wearing this shirt in my introduction when I was sitting in the sacred grove. I appreciate that there are 2 numbers in the design that are significant in Druidry and Nordic spirituality. There are 3 cobras, and the sun star has 9 points. I'm a bit of a math nerd, or you could say a Pythagorean, so I'll be getting more into sacred numbers and sacred geometry in future videos. Please check out the link in the description to buy this t-shirt from Jess's online store. As I said before, all human activities are connected, including different branches of knowledge. Hey, there's an example of a common phrase that reveals a deeper truth. Knowledge has branches, just like a tree. And like a tree in its branches, twigs, and leaves, all knowledge is part of a single connected whole. Areas of study that were once united are now separated into isolated ivory towers. However, as those greedy developers discovered, towers can be built, but they also fall. Which leads us to consider the wisdom of the tarot. Each week we'll find a corresponding card within various tarot decks that helps us to understand the deeper meaning of recent events. This week we find a card with an obvious connection to the news from the Crowley Thoth deck, the Tower card. The Tower card represents an extremely intense transformation. What has been safe is now endangered. Purifying fire threatens to destroy what has endured for a long time. This transformative power challenges attempts to protect what is valuable. However, while it is impossible to avoid change, confronting this challenge with courage can lead to positive outcomes. The Tower card also signifies the process of healing. Just as the extraction of a rotten tooth provides relief for the entire body, the destruction of stagnant situations and relations which hinder growth begins a healing process. How does the principle of the Tower card help us understand where denial of the destructive impact of the fossil fuel economy, especially carbon emissions, and resistance to change is leading humanity? As scientist James Lovelock, who is one of the founders of the Gaia hypothesis, said, The idea of Gaia may facilitate the task of converting destructive human activities to constructive and cooperative behavior. It is an idea which deeply startles us, and in the process, may help us as a species to make the necessary jump to planetary awareness. Though many fail to recognize our connection to all life, humanity is dependent on a healthy planet for a home. Damaging it is a threat to our prosperity. The challenge is to focus the power of inevitable transformation on the aspects of humanity which are destructive and have outlived any usefulness, the structures and processes of the fossil fuel economy and culture. Instead, we must all find ways to love our planet and all its beings, including human beings, in healthier ways. As Michelangelo said, "My soul can find no stairway to heaven unless it be through earth's loveliness." My alone planeth aguron iter peludren goleni